And that's where we are again here tonight. It's the Katrina Merriweather Show, and we're going to be talking Wright State women's basketball for the next 30 minutes here at Fly Boys in Beaver Creek. If you're in the area around the mall at Fairfield Commons, come on out and join us. Yeah, it's time to eat. Come on by. Great food here. We'll be hanging out till actually 7 o'clock tonight, because after we talk with Coach Merriweather about the women's team at Wright State, currently in first place in the Horizon League, we'll be talking men's basketball with Wright State head coach Scott Nagy and a couple of his players stopping by between 6:30 and 7. All right, the beat goes on, Coach Merriweather. You know, I was talking to you beforehand, and I said, you know, hey, congratulations. No, it's not congratulations. So far, so good for your team. Your team has won now 10 out of its last 11. You've got another 5-game winning streak right now. You completed a weekend sweep of IUPUI and UIC at home. So far, it looks like rebounding and also your defense has been fairly consistent this year. And you're grinding it out like you talk about. As you reflect upon the games up to this point, you know, what do you think has been good, some of the good things that you've seen from your team?
I think we have a lot of leadership going on right now. And it's not just Emily and Mac, it's Simone Simmons too. We actually had some individual meetings today where we kind of just got back together and discussed roles and what our goals are individually and as a team. And it just is amazing what the three of them are doing individually and then what they do to keep this team together.
All right, you've seen some of these players mature through the season. Who has been, I don't want to say a surprise, but who has really made the biggest strides this year on this team as far as their skill level and what they've been able to add to this team's success?
I would have to go with Tyler. Just because she was probably the most unproven coming into this year as far as being a returner. I think that Emily, Mac, and Simone have always kind of been there. They've been starting for a while, not to take them for granted because they're playing really well right now. But I kind of knew that they would be good. Tyler was a huge question mark just from the freshman year and playing just a few minutes a game, and now she's our starting 5 player, and we're relying on her a lot. And I think that has worked out pretty good for us. But our 5 spot is a 3-headed monster. So,
well, let's talk about the milestone that was reached here recently for one of your players in terms of rebounding. That's outstanding. Talk about that.
It's amazing. I mean, that kid is 5'8", and every time I talk about her, this is always the first thing I say is that's just downright heart and determination and grit, and really finding your niche. You know, saying, well, it's not my role to score or to shoot threes or whatever the case may be, but this is where I can do something really, really special, not just for myself, but obviously for my team. And she's just so deserving. I'm really, really proud of her.
Well, of course, it is all about the team, and that's something you emphasize. That's the culture, of your program. How has it been up to this point? It just seems like everybody's pitching in. They have a pretty good idea, and they've bought into you and your staff and what you expect of them.
Yeah, I always go back to when we were 1-3, and I just went to the office with the staff and said, man, this isn't working, what we're doing. And again, it was a very touchy situation because our schedule was so tough, opening up on the West Coast and playing Michigan State and playing Belmont. So it's not like we had lost to bad teams. But for some reason, it just didn't feel right. And so when we made this change where our focus then became more defense and rebounding, and we're just going to play really fast and get a lot of shots up. And I think that really made a difference, and their decision to buy into that really, really mattered. Those newcomers with Imani Partlow and Mikhail Miller and Angel Baker and our returners being able to cohesively put all that together, that's the chemistry is the biggest thing outside of buying in, of course.
And it takes a long time for that to happen, but it sure is nice to be able to have the team start to melt together and see, what their good things are as far as working together is concerned and winning at the same time. They say you lose a lot, you learn a lot from losing, but you can also learn a lot from winning, and you like that.
Definitely prefer that. I think that just keeps the morale up, and I think that what it does when a team wins and they put all that hard work into practice in the weight room and conditioning and the sacrifices. We have kids who have not just missed good stuff, like you always say, well, athletes don't get to go to parties and all this, and that's a part of it. But the bigger stuff is they miss weddings, they miss funerals, they miss the birth of their siblings and their nieces and their nephews. They sacrifice and miss so much that when you can win, I think it kind of makes it all worth it for them.
Coach, we were talking with Coach Nagy at the end of yesterday's game at IUPUI, and said something really interesting, and it doesn't. I would imagine it doesn't matter what sport it is, team sport, and that has to do with handling success and handling failure. You win a game, you start feeling good about yourself. You know, how are you able to come back in that next game and prepare yourself mentally? It's a lot different. You know, I'm sure if anybody, any coach has the secret, you know, formula to see how that works, you know, obviously you see more teams with long winning streaks. But what's it been like for your team this year? How are they been able to handle the fact that they have been a winning team, winning 10 out of 11 now, and they're in first place on the Horizon League?
We talk about it. You know, I think one of your options is to not talk about it and kind of hope that it doesn't happen, and that's not really my personality. It's more so that we talk about trap games. Yeah. You know, like you play Green Bay, you win, and now it's a letdown because you play Milwaukee. Well, why is it a letdown? Like that doesn't make any sense. That may be what people on the outside think. But what it should do is it should encourage you and motivate you to play well again, not show up for the next game. And I think that's what we talked about even going into Milwaukee is don't look ahead to Green Bay. You know, we have to play Milwaukee, and it doesn't do any good to lose to Milwaukee and beat Green Bay. Like, the whole purpose is to win every game. So we just take the next one and then go from there.
Well, for you and your staff, when those two teams played here earlier, Milwaukee, you know, gave a real tough test to your team. You only won that game, I believe, 61-57. It was a close game here at the Nutter Center.
It was. And I would argue that we had that conversation, too. We had just beat Green Bay, you know, for the first time. Yeah. You know, everybody was ready to go. And me personally, and I'm sure our kids get tired of it too, everybody always says, well, what about Green Bay? And we're like, you know.
Oh, yeah.
Whatever. Like, it's the next game. Well, like, we want to win them all. It doesn't matter who that one is. And so I think that everyone was so worked up and so amped up for that game that it was really, really tough to turn around on Saturday and play whoever was next, whether that had been Milwaukee or UIC. And we just kind of figured it out, I guess.
You ever sit down and talk with players in regard to, like, you know, media and things you should believe, things you should hear? I mean, let's face it, all schools, professional sports, I mean, I would argue with anybody that they, you know, are trying to brand themselves and they're trying to make themselves look better than they actually are. You know, and after times you start believing it all the time. You know, how do you go about telling your players, like, all right, you know what, you just need to focus on yourselves and not play into that? Because maybe that's some of it where they start thinking, oh, I got to think ahead of this great team we're going to play. Well, you know what, you don't know that until you get out there on the floor and play them.
Well, I'll tell you what's probably people would call it a double-edged sword, and that is, so we don't draw 2,500 people at our games. It's a very intimate, loyal group of fans, the ones that show up here, the ones that come to the games, the ones that even travel to watch us play. So, like, those people really, really care. And so there isn't a whole lot of blowing anybody's head up about how great we are. It's just kind of just good, solid, loyal people. And I can appreciate the intimacy that we have because of that. So we don't really have a lot of people telling us how great we are. It's not any different than you saying, hey, I want to say congratulations, but really it's just, you know,
so
way
far,
to go.
So good.
Yeah, from where we are. And I think that that's what keeps us grounded more than anything, which I appreciate because I think that's awful to have kids hearing how great they are every time, you know, they step into anything, to an arena, into a restaurant, into anything. So
it's not just hearing it also, it's what you see. Let's face it, you know, they're in sports. They see what's on television. They see players making highlights. They see players talking about, I'm not role models, you know, and even though they may be. And we've talked about that before with Charles Barkley, of course, being your idol.
Yeah.
So we know how you feel about that.
Yeah, that was way before he said that, I promise. But I do think that what our kids have to do is they just have to be humble. You know, I think humility is a huge thing that we talk about. It doesn't do any good to be arrogant. It doesn't do any good to walk around like you can just beat people because you've won the last 5 games. And we work really hard on that because one of our goals is just for everybody to be good people. You know, so I think that that's kind of where that starts. But, yeah, I hear you. This media situation for me, outside of the really knowledgeable people, because the thing about social media especially is that anyone can say anything, and we just try to steer them away from it more than anything. Let's just be really good people, good students, and play some basketball.
And a lot of that is because, you and your staff, you keep them busy. I mean, let's face it, they're student athletes. They have to go to school. They're working on their degrees. They have to go to practice. It's about time management. And to be able to stay away from those things which could be distractions, they just need to learn at an early age that, that is a distraction.
And that stuff is awful. We still collect their phones on the road, which is like really, really old school. Because now, just because you take their cell phones, some of them have two, some of them have iPads, some of them have tablets, some of them have laptops. You can't possibly, you need a huge box to collect everything that would stop them from actually talking to people. Not to mention, when I was in college, I just gave my boyfriend my room number, and then he called the hotel phone. So, we figure it out. We figure it out.
I was going to talk to you about that.
Yeah, if we want to talk to someone, we figure it out.
All right,
I
was going to say, we'll take a break real quick. I'm past. I see Sydney over there waving his arms, so I better take my break right now. We'll be back here at Fly Boys. We're talking with Katrina Merriweather, head coach, Wright State women's basketball. We'll have more when we return in just a moment.
The Horizon League's men's and women's basketball championships roll into Little Caesars Arena March 11th and 12th. Don't miss your chance to see the surviving 4 finalists of the Horizon League battle for an automatic berth in the NCAA tournament. $15 general admission and $25 two-day passes are on sale now. Don't miss out on the madness. Visit horizonleague.com or call 313-471-7575.
And we are back here in Beaver Creek. The weather is so much better than it was 2 weeks ago when we were here. Yes, it was freezing for quite a long time, a lot of snow, but we're thawing out here in the Miami Valley. And the Raiders, they continue their heat wave. They're in first place in the Horizon League, a game up. Only loss this year came at Youngstown State. Now, this weekend, it's a big weekend with Milwaukee and Green Bay. We'll talk a little bit more about that when we return here in just a few moments, Coach Merriweather. But the conversation right now has to do with, like social media, keeping your teams focused, and I always wonder what a challenge that is for a head coach and their staff to be able to keep their teams focused, because I know there's a lot going on with school. You've got a lot of people. There's a lot of organization in that, and they do a great job here at Wright State in regard to that. But let's face it, these are young people, 18 to 22 years old. You can't be with them 24/7.
No, you're right. What we were saying earlier was we take their phones on the road so that they don't have the ability to get a lot of what we always call stimulants. Your Facebook notifications, your social media stuff, all these things are constantly going. Like, when do you ever sleep? And when do you ever get into a deep sleep where you can actually rest because you're so worried about your phone going off? Again, they call it FOMO, the fear of missing out, where they just can't handle anything going on they don't know about. And we just try to express that your priorities have to be in place. We can't control any of that stuff. And at the end of the day, it has to be important enough to you to get enough rest. It has to be important enough to you to have your priorities straight. We're not going to babysit anybody 24 hours a day, and we're very fortunate with this group that there's a lot of peer governing going on. I think that in the event anything, could jeopardize our success, I think we got a strong group of people that are saying, hey, we're not doing that. And that's pretty exciting too.
You like in the sports, it's always been that way. The upperclassmen, they have to lead the way. I don't want to say hold their hand or whatever, but they just have to kind of teach them, and hopefully the younger players would understand, student athletes, on how to conduct themselves, not only, just in practice during games, on trips or whatever, but also how they go about their duties, at school. We've seen a lot of that here, at Wright State over the years. And I think it's really, really important, because once you get into the workforce, the same thing's going to happen. You want to hang around somebody who's experienced.
It's really cool. I was talking to Mackenzie Taylor today when we had these meetings, and she's interviewing for jobs, and she's going to get one because she's just awesome and so mature. And we remembered, I talked to her about, I'm 14 years old, it's the first time I saw her play, and I've known her since she was 17, and to watch her grow as a leader, someone who is very no nonsense, who's very hard nosed, and hey, you just do the right thing, things are black and white, and that you watch her grow, get to know people, develop this compassion for people who maybe didn't grow up with all the things that she did. And it's just amazing to watch their growth over that period. There's nobody better to talk to freshmen than your seniors. I'm old. They think that anything that I say is irrelevant because we didn't have social media. Yeah. But what our seniors, upperclassmen, Imani, who is a fifth year, what she can share with those young ones, I mean, it's priceless, and it's so much better than anything I could ever say, because they don't think I know what I'm talking about when it comes to that stuff.
Well, and you talk about the newer young ones, as you mentioned. You know, you have to give them a lot of credit, too, if they're willing to be able to hang around those who have a lot of experience, you know, to help them through and to make them better.
Today we did a lot of praising them about the small things, patting yourself on the back, because whether they know it or not, everybody doesn't do this. So a lot of people quit. A lot of people decide that it's too much, that they don't want to sacrifice. And sometimes when you have this big picture of winning championships or going to the NCAA tournament, then all you do is look at the end result, and you don't celebrate the wins along the way. You don't celebrate the A's along the way, or a class that you really struggle in. Shoot, celebrate the B. You know, if you hadn't worked so hard and hadn't been so committed, that could have easily been a C, you know, or a D. And we really talked about that, because it's, while we're achieving this level of success and all these accomplishments, let's not forget that this stuff feels really good, and not be so stressed and feel so much pressure about staying in first place or like any of that stuff. Let's just be really happy about where we are and work every day to be as good as we can be. And I think they walked out feeling pretty good today.
You know, a lot of the major companies, you know, they have you set goals. And any company that you work in, you got to have goals. You go about them in steps and trying to achieve those goals. With your team, obviously, the goal is to win the league. Do you actually specifically break down what your goals are with this team and what you expect to have at the end of the year?
You know, and Mike never did that. And him, where I played and where he worked at Cincinnati, my coach was very, very specific, you know, and it was. But is the goal, those are hard for me. Of course, to win a championship. So then do people say, well, we want to be undefeated at home, and then we want to be undefeated on the road. Okay, well, you just want to win all the games, right? Yeah. Okay, so
it's that simple.
You know, and so we don't really get into that, because I think it's tough when you do. I think that the smaller that you can make it, especially with all the stuff you're talking about. Let's think about everything that they have going on, all the distractions with the internet and all these things that we didn't have when we were playing and growing up. Like, let's keep it as simple as possible. And every day I would need you to wake up, be the best person you can be, work as hard as you can, and then go to bed at night and evaluate it. And if you feel good about it, great. And if you don't, then do better tomorrow. And let's just keep all this just as simple as possible. And I think that it works for this team anyway.
Is that something you experienced, you know, when you were a player that also became an assistant coach?
Oh, shoot. When I was a player, I didn't have anything figured out. I mean, I tell you. You know, and I share some of those things with our kids, because I think what's important for them to get is our staff in particular. Like, you've got Tennille Adams, who played in the Final Four at Arkansas, who had a Hall of Fame coach, and Ashley Barlow, who played at Notre Dame for a Hall of Fame coach. And then you kind of got Kim, who clearly is the GOAT here at Wright State at a mid-major school. Me and Abby were much more like role players. So you've got all these different perspectives from the five of us. And so I always share all the things I messed up. You know, how much more important it was for me to make sure that I was with my sorority in those events than to get extra shots up in the gym. How much of an effect that possibly had on my career. And if I could go back, of course I wouldn't change it, because you know, you change one thing, it changes everything. But I know exactly why I wasn't an All-American, or why I didn't start for 4 years. You know, where my attention was divided between all these different things. And if that's the career you want, then fine. But don't tell me that you want to be the best player in Wright State history and you're never in the gym, and you don't make sure you're in shape, and you don't do all these things. So there are things that successful people do. So do those things. And if you don't, then I don't want to hear you complain about it.
You know, we're starting to get to the bottom of this right now. You talk about different people who from different areas and what they've achieved, and as far as your staff is concerned, you hear that word transparency all the time. It's being able to relate, you know, to your student athletes. From the media side, I've always been told by our program directors, you know, your viewers, your listeners, you have to be able to be relatable, you know, to them, because they feel more comfortable and they're going to be able to understand what you're trying to communicate to them. So maybe that's just part of it, because you guys have kind of a diverse background as far as success, people who haven't had as much success, and the fact that you're very honest with them.
I think so. I mean, and who wants to talk to the know-it-all? You know, that's always on a pedestal, never did anything wrong. And, you know, nobody wants to talk to that person. So the best thing that I feel like we can always do is share our real life experiences. And that to me is just a huge discussion in general. You know, people, we just said this in the huddle the other day. if someone has to be perfect in order for you to listen to them, then you wouldn't listen to anyone. Okay, so who's better to tell you than someone who went through it and messed it up a little bit to try to stop you from making the same mistakes?
Absolutely.
You know, but and don't ever let what someone did not do make you miss the message that they're trying to give to you. So just because you know that Emily made a mistake when she was a freshman, now she can't say anything to you, and it doesn't make any sense. That's exactly who you should be listening to, because she's the one who messed it up. So now you won't mess it up when it's your turn. And I think that that's just really powerful that our kids are willing to do that for each other.
And that has a lot to do with possibly the success, because everybody is able to be honest with each other and say, listen, we're not perfect, but in this point, hey, you've lost a game already. You're not perfect, so you can look at that.
That's right.
And you have a lot more games remaining. And we're going to talk about a couple of those coming up this weekend at Milwaukee and Green Bay when we come back. Hey, stay with us. We have more from Flyboys here in Beaver Creek. This is the Katrina Merriweather Show. This is Wright State University basketball.
What does it mean to be a pioneer, reaching your full potential? It means being bold. No, bigger than bold, monumental. Where would we be if we ceased at the first "you can't do that"? How would we advance if we stopped in our tracks every time we heard "hey you, move back"? We develop thick skin when opposition wishes we'd stay soft. Against resistance, our persistence will pay off. At Wright State, our goal remains central. We are the pioneers of potential.
And welcome back. We got a few more minutes left here with head coach Wright State women's basketball. Raiders currently in first place in the Horizon League, just one loss this weekend, taking on Milwaukee and Green Bay up in the state of Wisconsin. But you knocked off IUPUI UIC at home. We got some highlights for the folks here at Flyboys right now. We'll describe the best we can those listening on radio right now.
That was the first possession of the game where Mikhail Miller attacks and dumps it to Tyler, and she makes the layup. Emily Vogelpohl in transition pulling up.
Good ball movement. Your team been moving the ball well offensively?
Well, yeah, but UIC was 40 minutes of zone. Then we turn around and play 40 minutes of IUPUI's man. So that was interesting. So, yes, that's us moving the ball inside out, kicking out to Mac to make the three in the corner. And Simone Simmons cutting through there and Mikhail Miller finding her. We run a pretty simple zone offense where everybody just passes and cuts and we find an open person. Simone Simmons has been playing really well on both ends lately. That's the three she just knocked down. Backdoor cut by Emily, pass from Mikhail Miller, who had been struggling, hurt her arm, then had her aunt pass. Just had a rough week, and she decided to pass the ball a little bit, and she was really good at that. Deja Evans, so happy to have her back. She made a great move right there in the short corner. Here we go. IUPUI, again, first play of the game. Mikhail dumps to Tyler. Mikhail, one more pass from Mac over to Emily in the corner for the three.
So unselfish.
Yeah, I'm telling you, the way that they're clicking. Now, this right here is a highlight. I mean, Angel Baker is so creative with that ball. That poor kid was on skates that whole possession. Here we got Simone driving, finding Mikhail up top. She needed to see that ball go in because she had a rug in a rough week. So it's always nice. But offensive rebound by Emily. IUPUI started to triangle into us, so it left us open to do some different things, and Emily was really good with that. Simone Simmons driving it hard. Again, she's just giving us this huge spark offensively. That's great.
We're seeing a lot of inside-outside with your team.
Well, because we can get sucked into shooting a lot of threes. And there's Mac making one there in the corner, and that was huge from Emily. And we just have to continue to attack. I mean, Simone's just scoring off ball screens. We don't even set one for her most of the time, and she knocked that shot down. So Angel finally putting it on the floor, getting all the way to the basket.
IUPUI, a team you said going into the season, one of the better teams in the league, and with that victory at home here at the Nutter Center, you swept them this year. Yeah,
and that needed to happen because it always means a lot to us. There goes Mikhail for a three over on the wing. From Emily. And like you said, you just see how excited that bench is and the people that are on the floor. I mean, Mac continuously proving that she's more than a three-point shooter, getting it on the floor, getting to the basket.
You'd like to see more play like that against Milwaukee and Green Bay coming up this weekend on the road.
Yes, I would love for us to drive it a lot. I told them we get it. You can shoot. long shots. If we could just get a little closer, I'd be happier.
What's it like? You know what it's take here in the last few years being an assistant and head coach here. When you go to Wisconsin, it's always tough. It doesn't matter what kind of squad they have.
No, it doesn't matter. First of all, it's freezing up there. And they're tough on top of it. And both those teams are very similar in terms of they have tall, thick, long kids. And I think that it's just such a different look from us that it just gives us a little bit of trouble every time we play them. But I like to think we give them a little bit of trouble too.
Well, Coach, Milwaukee is up first, a team you only beat by 4 here at the Nutter Center, so you're getting your team prepared, and you take it one game at a time. So you have the Panthers before you head on up to Green Bay.
That's
and
right.
It's always tough to play up there also.
It is.
So you keep their minds
is.
off of Green Bay for the first game, right?
Yeah, and I think that we will. Again, I think that they understand that this is how we got here. It's just taking and focusing on one game at a time, and there isn't any need to do anything any different now. The games of the past, is great that we won them, but they don't matter. We're here in the second round, and everybody's trying to beat everybody at this point. So,
Coach Merriweather, like always, we'll be back again next week here at Flyboys here in Beaver Creek. We'll get it underway at 5:30. Best of luck this coming weekend, and come back with 2 more wins and first place in the Horizon League.
Thank you.
All
Appreciate
right,
it.
stay with us. Coming up next here at Flyboys in Beaver Creek, we have Coach Scott Nagy and, of course, Jim Brown joining me here at Flyboys. We'll be back after these messages.